better understanding of your ways. We just thank you and ask this all in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Tonight we're going to go through a PowerPoint that Peggy made more than 15 years ago. After we're done with the PowerPoint presentation of what is a calendar, we're going to then have a discussion as to what does Scripture say about the keeping of time. I'd like to remind everybody to keep your mics muted. If you're on the phone, there's a code you can dial to mute your phone until we have the discussion. Now, when I start the PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to turn off my camera here and go right into sharing the screen. Try to save bandwidth for those people who don't have a lot of bandwidth. Once I go into PowerPoint, I can't see the meeting. So if somebody has a question, yell. I'll try to stop at certain different points in the presentation to make sure there isn't any questions or someone has a comment. So don't be afraid to holler out, "Hey, Don, stop." Apologize for that. Like I said, once I start doing the PowerPoint, I can't see you anymore. So feel free to, okay. So feel free to holler out and we'll get PowerPoint rolling here. Okay, close that. Okay, hopefully everybody sees the new Windows 10 emblem. I successfully updated this thing to Windows 10 and it actually works nice. I'm hearing a lot of nightmare stories about it. All right. Okay. What is the point? What is the purpose of tonight's? We have a seminar meeting. We're going to teach the basics on how the calendars work. We will be addressing 3 or 4 of the major calendars used by the Churches of God: the traditional COG calendar, the conjunction calendar, and the first crescent calendar. And just as a note for Peggy, you have to realign these. We're not trying to promote any one of these calendars during this. We're just explaining the mechanics behind them. What is a calendar? A calendar is a system of fixing of the civil year, arranging days and longer divisions of time, such as weeks and months, beginning, lengths, and divisions into a definite order. That's per Webster's 7th Euclid Dictionary. There are 3 types of calendars. There's the daily, the weekly, and the monthly. Pause for dramatic laughter. Actually, there is the solar calendar, lunar calendar, and the lunisolar calendar. The lunisolar calendar is not one that's crazy. I know it's saying that. I added that. The solar calendar is based on the movement of the Earth around the Sun. One revolution of the Earth around the Sun equals 1 year, or 365 days, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds. The lunar calendar is the movement of the moon around the Earth. One revolution of the moon around the earth equals 1 month. The solar year exceeds the lunar year by 11 days. And then there's the lunisolar calendar. It combines the movement of the moon around the earth and the earth around the sun. The months are reckoned according to the moon, and this year is reckoned according to the sun. Current calendar, the Gregorian calendar, is 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds for the earth to go around the sun, which is an extra 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds each year. So how is this corrected so that the seasons don't move out of position? Well, leap years. The leap year is in leap year they add a day, which is February 29th every 4th year. I think everybody's pretty much familiar with that. So we're going to go through some basic astronomy of how things work. Here the Earth is moving around the sun in an elliptical orbit. The orbit is not perfectly round. The Earth also rotates around, the moon also rotates around the Earth in an elliptical orbit. Because of this, the moon can be 100% full in as little as 13.8 days after the conjunction, and the conjunction is the dark moon, and as much as 15.8 days after the conjunction. That's because of the elliptical orbit. Also affecting this variation is because the moon is going around the earth is going around the sun, and the gravitational pull of the earth holds the moon in its orbit. However, as we are going around the sun, as the moon comes towards the sun, it accelerates. And then as the moon goes back around the backside of the earth, it slows down. So this causes a variation up to 2 days for a full moon. When the moon is between the sun and the earth, it's an eclipse. We'll have a little bit more about the eclipse later. So you see the basic orbit, but the actual orbit is off. It's actually tipped slightly, 3 degrees. When we see the moon, we're actually seeing the reflected light of the sun off the moon. Now there's two planes that cross. When we get a solar eclipse, the light of the sun is bouncing off the backside of the moon, and it causes a shadow on the earth, as you can see here in this diagram. And I'd like to take a moment to also thank Jim Rudd. I borrowed a lot of stuff out of his book, and I'll post his website a little bit later. He's got all this stuff posted online, his books and all of his writings. So thank you again, Jim. Here is an illustration of a lunar eclipse. The full moon passes behind the Earth and is shadowed by the Earth. This makes the full moon appear to disappear. This can only happen if the two are on the same plane. And recently, we've had a lot of what people have called blood moons. That's when this gets really close to an absolute dark of the moon. It's just a little bit off. We've seen a lot of that lately, a lot of the blood moons and the lunar eclipses. Okay. When the moon is in orbit, it dictates what we see from Earth, the reflected light of the sun on the moon. So depending on where the moon is in its orbit will determine how much of the moon we see. So if it's not reflecting any light, we don't see the moon. If it is reflecting a light, we see the moon. Okay, here we have the different calendars, and here's how they work. The traditional COG, Church of God, LL2 calendar. Why was it created? It was created to keep the Jews together. It was actually Hillel that released the calculations to the various different people, various different, would say, tribes and groups. The Sanhedrin he was the last of the Sanhedrin. The temple was gone. The Jews were no longer in Jerusalem after 70 AD. And for the sake of keeping them all on the same holy days, the same timing, he made public the calculations so that they would be, wherever they are on the earth, they would be in unity. At least that's what I have been told. There's others who just debate that. I really think it was to try to keep them all on the same date. Where did it come from? Rabbinic rules used to verify the accuracy of the witnesses of the first crescent. That's what I believe. That's what I think it was used for. There are others who say the calculations have been there. Somebody has a microphone open. Please mute your mic. Okay. There are those who say that these calculations have been around since as early as Adam. And I'm not going to argue that point. At the end of this, I will give you a website of a gentleman who has done an extensive amount of work to try to prove that. You be the judge. You can review his work and see what you think. Okay, how does it work? One, we have to calculate the molad of Tishri for a particular year. Two, we have to determine what day of the week Tishri 1, or trumpets, will fall, whether it be a Monday, Tuesday, etc. Three, we add the postponements. There are 4 major postponements, and they have various rules which we'll go over later. Then we count backwards to find the first day of unleavened bread. And then we add intercalation, or actually the intercalation is added in the midst. Okay, so calculating the Tishri 1 for a particular year. To find Tishri 1, we start from a benchmark point in the past, calculate forward using an average movement of the moon around the earth, otherwise known as a molad. Future information or further information can be found in Dr. Hayes' book, and I think the website we have here is no longer available.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the website is done. So, molad Tishri for a particular year. What is a molad? Actual molad and the mean molad. An actual molad and a mean molad. Actually, the actual molad and the mean molad are the same thing. It's just who you're talking to. Some will call it an actual, some will call it a mean because it's an average. An actual molad is the average time from one conjunction to the next. There's 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 33 1/3 seconds, or 793 heckim. I probably pronounced that wrong. Or parts, right. Thank you. A molad is a mathematical average of the conjunction, no more and no less. Okay, mean molad, there's our mean molad. Basically means the same thing, it's an average. So one is saying we have an actual calculated average, and the other one says we have an average. Okay, what is all this part stuff? Instead of minutes and seconds, the hour is divided into 1,080 parts, each part corresponding to 3 1/3 seconds, and each part is divided into 76 moments. So if someone says, I'll be with you in a moment, that's not a lot of time. And that's actually where that comes from, that saying. Okay, here are the 12 months of the calculated Jewish calendar. Does anybody notice anything? Nobody notices anything with this slide?
Well, they're all named after pagan gods. And
That is true.
Tammuz is number 1, which shouldn't be. Should be Abib should be number 1.
Right. The Geyers have it. What the point I'm looking for is 12 months of the calculated Jewish calendar, and we have 13 listed here. There's a reason why we have 2 Adars. A normal Hebrew year is 354 days long. Under the rules, it is also possible for a year to be only 353 days, called a defective year, or 355 days, called an excessive year. If a year is defective, the month of Kivez, you read it there, will have 29 days instead of 30. If the year is excessive, Hezvan will have 30 days instead of 29. So we have to calculate the Molad of Tishri for a particular year. And we have to determine what day of the week it will fall on. Okay. Now, in doing the aforementioned calculation, you get a number. You take that number and use a formula, which we're not going to go into here. It's way too lengthy. And that will give you a number. 1 is for Sunday, 2 is for Monday, etc. That will give you what day of the week trumpets will be on. You need to know that. That's an important part of this calendar. So once we determine which day it falls on, we can then apply the postponements. To prevent, now this is the postponement that gives a lot of people indigestion. This is the one that people have been fighting about, killing each other over, unnecessarily hurting each other over. This is the problem child. To prevent the Day of Atonement from falling on a Friday or a Sunday, or the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles from falling on a Sunday, a Saturday. Tier 1 can never fall on a Sunday because when the Molad of Tishri falls on a Sunday, then the Tabernacles falls on a Sabbath. Okay, which is not allowed by rabbinic rules because the ceremony of beating the willows, Hoshana Rabbah, is considered work and shouldn't be done on the Sabbath. Again, there's a lot of debate on this. This is what I was taught. This is what I put together looking at various different sources. There are those who say that this is still to keep the calendar in sync. This, like I said, postponement rule number 1 is the hot potato. Nobody argues the other 3. Huh? You're not done with it. I know. Okay. Tishri 1 can never fall on a Sunday. Or
can I interrupt here a minute?
You certainly can.
All of these rules that you are giving are of absolutely no consequence. If you start at creation and you come forward in increments of 7 days, which is the standard week, none of those rules apply. It's just a matter of mathematics that these days are not used. It has nothing to do with rules. Absolutely nothing. And this is an important point, because the Jewish rabbis use all these rules to keep control over the people. They say, oh, you have to come to us to get the true understanding, when in fact these days were set. The holy days, are called Sabbaths, were set at creation. They have never changed. They are set at creation, and they come forward in progression of 7-day weeks. It's very simple. What you're doing is you're making it very complex, and it isn't complex at all. Okay.
Okay, that was Don Roth, and he has done an extensive amount of work on the traditional calendar. Don, you want to give your website where your DVDs are available that explains what you just told us?
And let me see. It's biblical calendar. No, wait a minute. I need to know that for sure. I never remember my own website. This is the problem.
Find it off at
biblicalcalendarproof.com.
Okay, biblicalcalendarproof.com. Don has done a lot of work, and he's been working on this for what, 6-7 years now?
Well, I spent the initial time I spent was about 3 years to get it really straightened out.
Right. And I remember you were sitting down here saying it. Has anyone even considered, we all try to count backwards, but you were the one that actually thought, well, let's try counting the other direction. And
right. From creation, bringing the years forward.
So, again, you got the website. You can go there. He has DVDs. He has the calculator on that site. You can.
it's down right now.
Oh, it's down right now? Okay. The calculator will hopefully be up soon again. And more than welcome to go and look. Like I said when we began this is supposed to be an open. I'm just presenting what I've been taught. And I try to make it clear that this rule number 1 is up for debate. It's not, accepted by everybody. So I thank you, Don, for bringing in your comments.
So, Don, this is Lorraine and Paul. I apologize. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah, I have a horrible cold, so I don't know how long I'm going to last tonight. But in your defense, my understanding is you're presenting what you believe the rabbis have come up with as their explanation. Is that correct?
Yes, this is the rabbinic explanation based on Jim Rudd's book, a
lot of research.
Yeah, the Jewish Encyclopedia Judaica, studies on Josephus. There's a lot of biblical, or I should say extra historic research on this, plus the Jews and the rabbinic teachings.
Okay, fair enough. Carry on.
Okay. Where did I leave off here? Okay.
It can't fall on a Wednesday.
It can't fall on a Wednesday. Again, this is per Jewish tradition. If Tishri 1 falls on a Wednesday, then Tishri 10, the Day of Atonement, will fall on a Friday, causing 2 Sabbaths to happen consecutively. This has been determined by the Jewish authorities to cause undue stress on the people, having 2 consecutive fast days or day. I have a day of preparation, then a fast day, then a Sabbath. Tishri 1 cannot fall on a Wednesday. On a Friday. When Tishri 1 falls on a Friday, then Tishri 10 will be on or Atonement falls on a Sunday, which is adjacent to Sabbath, which once again causes an inconvenience for the people, a hardship. So, only days that Tishri 1 can land on is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday. In Jim Rudd's book, there is 3 or 4 pages about the percentage of times Tishri 1 falls on a Tuesday or Thursday, and other information. And Jim Rudd has got all his publications online. I'll give you his website.
Hey, Don?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Jim. Those are actually from Spear. When I quote those are not mine. Those are Alfred Spear, who's the foremost calendar expert of the 20th century for the Jewish calendar. Who has
Okay.
that.
Great. While you're there, while you're on here, can you give everybody your website that you got all your publications on?
www.keepersoftheway.org.
All right. www.keepersoftheway.org.
Yep.
Website. There's a lot of stuff there too. So, a lot of good stuff. Okay, where was I now? Yes. Okay, postponement rule number 2. If the Moed is at noon or later for Tishri 1, then Tishri 1 is delayed by 1 day. All right. The history is this rule seems to be a leftover. Original purpose was to help the court to judge as to whether witnesses who claim to have seen the young moon could have actually seen it. Again, this is ruling for postponement rule number 2. Or unless postponement rule, see, and this is where the postponements collide. If postponement rule 1 kicks in, then it gets kicked 2 days. Now, okay, you got postponement rules 1 and 2. Because of the mentioned limits on the number of days in a year, we need another 2 postponements. If the Moed of an ordinary leap year falls on the 3rd day, Tuesday. Okay, not a leap year. Thank you for. 3rd day falls Tuesday at 204 parts. That is
at 9 hours.
9 got cut off. Okay, thank you. Okay, at 9 hours, 204 parts. That is 3:11 a.m. and 20 seconds. Tishri is put off 2 days because Tishri 1 trumpet is okay. A postponement to Wednesday is not permitted, as in Rule 1, so it is deferred to Thursday. Okay, so we can't have it on a Wednesday, we have to move it to a Thursday. If the Moed Tishri occurs at that hour, the year would be 1 day too long. Okay, postponement rule number 4. When the Moed of Tishri following immediately after leap year occurs on the 2nd day, Monday, at 15 hours, 589 parts, which means Monday at 9:32 a.m. and 43 1/3 seconds. If the reckoning is made backwards by subtracting the 13 Moedot of Tishri of a preceding year, would have had its molad on Tuesday at noon. Having occurred at that time, Tishri 1 of the previous year would have been, as you can see, it's a bit windy. I'm not going to get it.
Hey, Don.
Yes.
So can I just, rules 3 and 4 are basically there. Everyone agrees from amenities on down that they're there to shorten the year because rules 1 and 2 would make it too long. So
Right.
rules 3 and 4 are there because of rules 1 and 2. You know, you can go through all the details, but that's really what they're there for.
This was meant to be a humorous kind of thing. A guy's pulling his hair out. But yes, that was. Thank you for mentioning it so simply. Okay. Postponement rule 4. When a common year succeeding a leap year, the molad Tishri occurs on Monday morning, 589 parts after 9 a.m., it is postponed to the next day. This prevents the previous year from being too short. We've applied the postponements. Now we count backwards to find the first day of unleavened bread. And we do intercalation. Now, counting backwards, I don't know exact days on this. This was kind of a gray area at the time. But
It's
we
been a
count
long time
backwards.
since I looked at it, but I think it's 177.
That sounds right. It's been 15 years since I looked at this either. Yeah, it's 115. No, 177? I believe so.
I don't know. You count back to find.
Okay, you count backwards to find UV, and then you count forward to do trumpets and atonement. Intercalation. These are where the leap years are applied. Leap years are added to 7 years of the 19 year cycle. They are added on years 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, 17, and 19. So we'll do. Are there any other questions on what I've covered so far? I'll just click through this. This isn't flowing right.
Okay.
Oh, there they go. Okay, we're going to go on to the next calendar, which is the conjunction calendar. I know there's some people who are listening who are observing this calendar. Conjunction calendar, the conjunction of the moon with the sun is the point of time at which the moon is directly between the earth and the sun, but in the same place. So it's invisible. You cannot see a conjunction. That's the dark of the moon. The earth is orbiting the sun in an elliptical orbit, and the moon is also orbiting the earth in an elliptical orbit, and they are not in the same plane. They're off about 3 degrees. We covered this earlier. When the earth is in between, you get a lunar eclipse. Okay. Now, how you start, like postponement rule number 2, entirely for astronomical reasons, if the molad is at noon or later, Tishri 1, is delayed by 1 day. A decision has to be basically made. A conjunction can happen day or night, and there is no set time for this. So if you're keeping this calendar, you have to decide, is this dark of the moon going to be applied to the day you're in or the day later? Okay, so if the conjunction occurs on any given day, the next sundown will be the first day of the month. Now again, others It all depends on how you're applying this with this particular calendar. The conjunction can occur anytime, so this is how it's applied. If it occurs at 3 a.m. or as late as 5:50 p.m. the next day of the month, okay? So basically, if it occurs in here, then this is the first day. That's based on the dark of the moon. Okay, you can do it that way, or you can pick a certain time of any given day. The second way this is considered is you pick a time, sunrise or 6 a.m. Then that day. Okay, so if it occurs before sunrise, then this particular day is your first day. But again, if you're doing this calendar, you have to make a decision how you're going to apply that moon, because it's going to occur at any time. Okay. So if it occurs after sundown or sunrise, then the next day would be your first day.
Hey, Don, can I point out one thing? This is Jim.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, I think Lauren is.
The conjunction is real easy now. We have, all these mathematics to figure it out. But 2,000 years ago, it wouldn't have been as precise. When the moon went dark was not the conjunction. Conjunction occurred 6 to 8 to 10 hours after it went dark. So just so you know, now it's real easy. The exact moment of the conjunction down to the second. 2,000 years ago, it wouldn't have been quite so easy.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Lauren, do you have any comments? I think you're doing the conjunction calendar, aren't you?
Don, just so you know, this is Jim. I did the conjunction calendar for about 2 years, too.
Okay, because I know Lauren, who lives here in Wisconsin, almost a Youper. You should get a strong wind from the south, he'll fall into the UP of Michigan. I think he still is keeping that calendar. Screen sharing has stopped, so no one can. Can you guys see my screen? Oh, there it started again. Oh, I just got to notice my screen sharing stopped. We'll continue on here. Okay, how to start the new year. Most people who keep this calendar use this method, is use of the equinox. On most of the calendars you have at home, the conjunction is marked with a black circle labeled new moon. The spring equinox is called the first day of spring, usually March 20th or 21st. The reasoning is that the holy day must fall after the equinox. In other words, in the spring, not in the winter. Although the conjunction can occur before that, we have a number of Passover debates because of this. Let me back up here. I got myself lost. Okay, start the year conjunction closest to the spring equinox, where all the spring holy days fall after the equinox, is one way. The other way is to pick the first conjunction after the spring equinox, and then to determine the start of your year. It's those people that pick the first moon after the spring equinox that usually end up having an extra month later. Sometimes it can be as close as like several minutes that they'll determine, it occurred here, and it can be really close. However, it's scripturally defendable. Okay, when using the equinox method, intercalation happens automatically, and the decision for when to add the extra month is not necessary. It's pretty much cut and dry. You got your rule based on the equinox. It's going to happen one way or the other. Using the equinox method results in a lunisolar calendar. Using the Abib method, keeping the calendar as a lunar calendar. So if you use the equinox, you have a lunisolar calendar. If you use the Abib method, which we're going to explain here in a little bit, is keeping the calendar a lunar calendar. Okay, Abib observance. To be explained in the first crescent calendar. This is where the most commonly it is used. So, how to start the new month? The conjunction today, first day tomorrow. Conjunction before 6 a.m., first day today. Conjunction after 6 a.m., first day tomorrow. Like Jim had mentioned, 2,000 years ago, it was hard to determine. It was either that it happened or it didn't. How to start the new year? Use of the equinox or use of Abib. Any questions so far?
What do you mean by use of Abib, Don?
We're going to explain that coming up in this next step.
Okay, cool.
Okay, first crescent calendar. The months begin when you see the first visible crescent. You will find the first little sliver of the moon very close to the horizon in the west, near sunset, for about 20 minutes, depending on how old the moon is. The further the sighting is from the conjunction, the older the moon is. The brightness of the crescent will be, and it will be the longer it will be visible to see. Okay, where the moon is in orbit dictates when we will see the reflected light off of the moon. So, okay, we cannot see it at all on a conjunction. As the moon moves around the Earth, we can see a first crescent. And we can see a quarter, etc. Again, a first crescent is the first visible reflection of light off of that little bit of a moon. First crescent can be visible as soon as 16 to 20 hours after the conjunction if conditions are absolutely perfect. The first crescent, okay, is there. And after about 20 hours under good conditions, it's about 1% illumination. But to see a 20-hour-old moon, you just about need perfect conditions. Okay, if the conjunction occurs at 2 a.m. Jerusalem time, and their sundown is 6 p.m., the moon will only be 16 hours old, and it'll be most likely not seen by the Karaite Jews in Jerusalem. However, the people in the United States are 7 to 10 hours after Jerusalem time. Therefore, the moon will be 23 to 26 hours old, and under good conditions, most likely will be seen. Okay, so this presents a problem. A decision needs to be made as to whether you are observing the crescent locally or at a fixed point like Jerusalem. And Jerusalem observance is common. And again, both of them are totally acceptable. As in the conjunction calendar, there are two ways to start the new year. Start the year with the new moon closest to the spring equinox, where the spring holy days fall after the equinox, or pick the first new moon after the spring equinox. Intercalation happens automatically. A decision does not need to be made as to when the extra month is. Use of the equinox results in a lunar solar calendar. What is a bib? That is a bib. One of the names of the first month of the year in the Hebrew calendar. It is not just the name of a month, it's actually an agricultural event. Okay, my computer has decided to not cooperate. Okay, it is an occurrence of a bib that determines the first. Jim Rudd said that's a terrible joke. Thank you.
I like it.
Peggy liked it. That determines ABIB determines the first month of the year. Okay. ABIB indicates a stage in the development of the barley crop. Barley is a chief early grain in the Middle East. The ripe barley is also used in the Omer ceremony during the days of unleavened bread. So we can't start a new year until we have ripe barley to use for the Omer. Therefore, near the end of the 12th month, we look for signs of spring, one of which is the barley. Will it be ripe on time for an Omer the following month? Okay. The Karaite Jews in Israel go out to observe the barley. Brian Convery also goes over there. There's a couple people that go over to Israel to look for barley. In Israel, barley grows like weeds. It's everywhere. In the cracks, on the side of the road, it's like a weed, and it's very easy to find. Now this is an old slide. It says the Congregation of Yahweh in Arizona, which has a similar climate and is at the same latitude as Jerusalem, grows cultivated barley for the specific purpose of declaring ABIB. They no longer do this because one year they went out and to look at the cultivated barley down there, and they encountered something that they didn't like. They noticed that half of the barley was barely in the milk stage, or it was just starting to form. The other half of the barley was practically falling off. One field wasn't even close to being ready. The other field was being harvested. And he asked the farmer basically, well, how did this happen? He goes, oh, this is a genetic strain. It's a little bit different. And see, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get into the barley market before the price falls. Because you get a flood, the market price drops because there's so much barley. And he said, so I'm trying to time it. I'm using this barley here to jump the market to get the high price. The price will spike, and then this other barley is going to come in later as the price is going back up. Well, Congregation of Yahweh, as far as I know now, uses the equinox method because man has the ability to mess with the grain. Comments?
Yeah, Don, just so you know, this is Jim. Barley is also far more susceptible to the amount of precipitation that it gets. That is, if it doesn't get enough rain, it doesn't come up. Wheat, corn, if you've been a farmer, you see wheat and corn, if you don't give enough water, it is stunted and takes a long time to come up. Barley is even more susceptible to that. So barley really, when it comes into a bib, that is when it's ripe or whatever, is far more dependent upon the amount of moisture it gets than wheat or corn or other crops.
And what I've found interesting, thank you, Jim. What I've also found interesting is over the years of, I personally, pegging on it, I keep this calendar. We have people going, oh, they're going to add a month, they're going to add a month, they're going to add a month. And then all of a sudden in Israel, the snow melts or the water comes in, it warms up, and in a relatively short period of time, it matures, it ripens, it's ready. And I've had the reverse happen. Oh, we're going to be early, we're going to be early. And then all of a sudden it gets cold and dry, and the barley just stops growing. God's in charge. That's the way we look at it. And his timing, barley is, like Jim said, very susceptible to conditions. And it doesn't take much to slow it down. It doesn't take much to accelerate it. So on to our next slide. Okay. A decision has to be made to use the barley method. Because barley is not a common spring crop throughout the world, when it is used as a spring crop in many areas in the Middle East, it may have a significant difference in harvest time. So, do you use a Jerusalem harvest or a local harvest? One of the things that we have learned, we've been doing this now for 15, 16 years now. We've made mistakes in the past. We've listened to people who, it's going to be early, it's going to be early. One thing that we've learned in driving truck is when the barley is near ready in Jerusalem and Egypt and in the Middle East, we start seeing signs of spring here. An example is the barley seems to be ready about the same time that in Wisconsin, the sap starts to flow on the maple trees. The early bulb plants start to come up. The really early bulb plants start to bloom. The forsythia is starting to bud out, and it has a yellow flower. The pussy willows, the fuzzy tips start to break. The leaves start breaking on some of the... There's signs of spring. And depending on where you live, those signs of spring, in what little research we did in comparison, coincidentally line up with that barley in Israel. So, it's spring. If you don't find the barley, if you don't have the signs of spring in the 12th month, you add another month, which would be a 13th month or Adar 2. So, we know, keeping the first crescent calendar, we know that when we see the last crescent of Adar or of Adar 2, and we see the barley is a bib, and then we see the first crescent, we know that. It's a new day, it's a new month, and it's a new year. And of course, we just went through the civil new year here in the United States, so I thought this would be a very timely chance to go through the presentation. And again, we borrow a lot from Jim material. Thank him for his comments tonight. And Brian Convery has been very active in does things differently. He doesn't really go over and just say, okay, I'm proclaiming a day. He basically goes there and says, this is what we see. We see the barley in this particular zone is at this stage. We see a lot of pregnant lambs. He reports what he sees. He does make a declaration. Now, there are those people who follow and listen to Nehemiah Gordon. He proclaims. He actually goes out with his people and he makes a decision saying, we hereby proclaim the beginning of the year. So whatever way you want to do it, this is just an explanation. Now what I want to do is I want to step out, and you've seen the PowerPoint. Any questions? About the presentation, about the calendar? The seminar anyways. We tried to make this as unbiased as possible, just give the mechanics. I actually asked people when we gave this at the feast in 2001 and 2002, what calendar were we on? And everyone said that we were on the Hillel calendar. So I thought, well, we did a good job in trying not to be biased one way or the other. But now I want to have a discussion. I want everybody to participate in this. What does the Bible actually say about the calendar? Is there anybody has some thoughts or want to get this ball rolling?
Hey, Don, this is Jim.
Go for it.
A lot of people put a lot of things out there. I did a good amount of research. There's Exodus 12:2. This month shall be the beginning of months to you. We know the general time frame. That was the Exodus. You could say that's March, April. You can't really put it into September, October. There's one other set of verses, including that the new month is also the first day of Tishri when the trumpets are blown. So there's really only two sets of scriptures. One, Exodus 12:2, showing when the general time of the year should start, and that each month needs to start on the new moon. There is nothing else in the Bible on what calendar, anything like that. People want to go to Psalms 81. That's not a calendar scripture. That's scripture about observing Passover. You can go to, the Tekufah and things like that, but there's really only two general ordinances, and even the new moon is not defined in Scripture. Now you can take a look, and around the entire Mediterranean, in history, there's no doubt that the new moon is the first crescent. People want to say, oh, the pagans say that the new moon is the first crescent. No, every civilization around the Mediterranean had that the new moon is the first crescent. But that's not defined in Scripture. There's only two things in Scripture. General time when to start the year, and that the month starts with the new moon.
Yep. I was just thinking that. We know in the time of the Exodus, the children of Israel had lost their calendar. They have lost sense of time. I think the Egyptians had a 9-month solar calendar with like 43 days in it or something. It was different, way different.
No, it was a 12-month calendar, 30 days, 360 days, and it was purely solar. But that's because they depended upon the Nile. But a couple of times in their history, the Egyptians are weird in that they had a tendency, when a new king took over and he didn't like what the old king did, they wiped out all history, sort of like 1984, wiping everything out. So there may have been a couple of instances when they did a lunar calendar, but generally they had a solar calendar that was 360 days long. How they intercalated, I have no idea, but each of their months was 30 days.
Lisa, Well, they had, they did not observe the traditional or a calendar as God originally had instructed them. So the first thing God had to do was say, this is how we're going to do it. And of course, it is recorded, the hail destroyed the barley for it was ripe, and the flax because it was in bloom. So, that's where the barley observance is coming from. That's scripture. They look for the barley. And I think a lot of them are looking for the barley, but what about the flax? The year that we ended up being early, the flax wasn't in bloom yet. I found that out after the fact.
Brian looks for the flag.
Yeah, Brian Convery looks for the flax. He also looks for
Birds.
the migration of birds. He looks at the other crops. He also looks for lambs. Do you have lambs? You need a new lamb for the Passover. Are there any lambs? Where are the ewes at? Right. He tries to be open about that. But yeah, that's the only places I see. Is there anyone else that's got anything? I know in Genesis it talks about the purpose of the moon is to proclaim the holy days.
Right, Genesis 1:14. This is Jim Steinley.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is those who go by the barley, then they're really ignoring what Genesis 1:14 says. So let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years. And the Hebrew is the Moedim. In other words, which is also found in Leviticus 23 as feasts, that same word. And so we know it's the sun and the moon that's to tell us when we're to observe the feasts. And it doesn't say anything about barley. It just happens to, if you have the appropriate calendar, I would say, as I think I do, that it automatically works right in there, just because of how it's worked. Take the first new moon after the equinox. You can't have a new moon like the Jews do when it's maybe in the old year, before the equinox. It's the first new moon of the year. So it's like, I don't see how the barley factor in it, other than the fact that it's going to automatically fall in properly.
And Jim, where do you find the equinox in the Bible? This is Jim Rudd.
Pardon me, I missed what you said there.
Yeah, you were a little overmodulated, Jim.
Where do you find the equinox in the Bible? There is no doubt. I don't follow the barley being in a bib. It's one of many signs that I look at, including looking at the moons. I have a question for you. Where do you find the equinox in the Bible?
Well, you do find the Kumpa, the turn of the year, in the fall, where the fall feasts are to be held after the turn of the year, at least the Feast of Tabernacles. And so what is a year? What's the question? So it's the first new moon of the year. What is a year? And the most logical explanation is that it is the equinox.
Well, except that it's not the standard that's in the Bible. Tekufa is mentioned 4 times. It's a cycle. It's a complete circle. Tekufa means completing the whole thing around. Now, just so you know, I'm going to lend you some support. From about 400 on, the Tekufa were both the solstices and the equinox in most of the Jewish writings. So, there's some support to say that the Tekufa actually is either a solstice or an equinox. But if you're a movie fan, then you know that The Gay Divorcee, which Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers were in 60 years ago, were that he was a happy guy to be divorced, and he wasn't a homosexual who was getting divorced because he was gay. You have to take a look at exactly what the definitions of words were at their time. And Tekufa, the only biblical reference is that it's a circle. It's a cycle. It's a completed cycle. So if you want to try
Right,
and
and it does
say,
talk about summer and winter, the two cycles.
right, there's only two cycles, summer and winter. So does summer start at the equinox, at the solstice?
No, it doesn't. But I think that if you need to have, well, actually, we all know that the spring feasts occur in the spring.
Actually, there is no
And
such thing as a spring feast in the Bible. All the feasts occur in summer, and then there is winter, which is the rainy season. In the Bible, there's only two seasons. It's just like California.
right,
There are only two seasons.
yep.
So
But
once
there is no command in the scripture to go by the barley.
I agree, but there's no.
That's imputed.
No, it's not even imputed. There is nothing about barley. A bib is a term which is the general time of when the barley gets ripe. But it's also
Or green ears.
It's when it also begins to dry out. It's when the lambs are born. It's a general time frame. I don't look at just the barley being at a certain stage because I think that's too specific. And I don't believe the Bible is that specific. Where when you say the Tekufa
I
is
agree.
a solstice or an equinox down to an exact day, well, then you're getting even more specific. Do you see that?
No, I didn't really actually follow all that exactly.
You said that I look at
So-
lambs, at the ripeness of crops, at snow melting, at all these things. Is it going from winter into summer? There's only two seasons, we agree. Has it gone from winter into summer? That's kind of an approximate thing. That's not an exact thing, right?
Oh, Don?
Well, it depends on what. Yeah, it does depend on what your definitions and what weight you would place on any particular evidence. You're right.
Right. So
Don,
what I'm
may,
saying
may
is,
I add something? This is John Holman calling from Zeeland, Michigan.
Oh,
let me
go on ahead,
just-
John.
okay,
Let John speak.
I came across this for what it's worth quite a while ago. I'll read from Genesis 8. This is after the flood and Noah came out of the ark and he builds an altar to God. In the middle of verse 21 and then all of verse 22, it says, "And then the Lord said in his heart, I never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done." Verse 22. "While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." Well, actually, you do have 4 seasons there. You have summer and winter, seed time and harvest are in the fall and the spring. So you actually do have 4 seasons
Right.
there. That is, the temperate climates which we, are living in here.
Right.
but I'd say that's actually 2 seasons. Seed time is when you plant at the beginning of summer, and harvest is at the end of summer. If you take a look at Jerusalem or that entire area of the Middle East, it is very much like California. There are 2 seasons. That is, you have a wet season at the winter, as we would call it, and then you plant at the very end of winter, going into summer, and then you harvest at the end of summer.
Now, I'm just curious, what does someone in Australia do? I mean, those people are upside down backwards. We got summer, they've got winter. When it's spring, it's fall. We get to watch, stuff bloom, and they're watching stuff die. How does someone down there handle this?
Well, let me make it even a little easier, Don, to make it even more confused. We met with people in Florida, 2001, 2002. They were from Oregon. And they agreed they saw the first crescent. And they agreed we could not see it in Florida, just like it was not seen in Jerusalem. Yet they had traveled to Florida for the feast. So therefore, the first day of Tishri for them was actually a day earlier than us on the East Coast. And they agreed, there was no doubt that was the case. So, but they traveled all the way across America, and they're there. So which days do they keep? Do they keep the day that they saw in Oregon because they were local? Or do they keep the day they have local on the East Coast?
Those are the arguments that get me thinking that Jerusalem is maybe the best thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Peggy was just saying. It's arguments like that to make us think maybe Jerusalem's the right way to do it.
But
Then again, I think Satan does everything he can to trip up anything that God does. Who decided that the international date line was going to be in the Pacific? Because if you move the international date line to Greenwich Mean, most of the time, regardless when we saw the moon, we'd be on the same day. Think about it. Could he have inspired the moon to be, the date line to be put in the wrong ocean? Just to trip us up? Divide God's people? Because, I mean, if they don't see it in Jerusalem, okay, they didn't see the moon. So then you cross the date line, it's tomorrow, and we see it. By the time it gets around to them, they see it too. And if they see it, they declare we're into the next day. Most of the time we'd be on the same day. That was just a thought of mine.
you kind of have to look at a you kind of have to look at a map to see that, but it works out pretty good.
I don't think that question is going to be answered until Christ returns. Any other comments, questions, thoughts, suggestions? Because I agree with previous discussion. There's not a whole lot mentioned as to what to do, what calendar to keep. And there are those, like I said before, that believe that a calculated calendar is what was there from the beginning. There's
Don, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
It's Lorraine. I think in the long run, for him to know to do what is right, or I know I'm paraphrasing this terribly because I can't really think very clearly. I'm so tired and fighting this cold. But you have to go by with what you know. And that's fine. But at the same time, you have to give your brother his space. And when we all stand before the judge, it's going to be, did we show each other mercy and love? Or, what it boils down to is how we treated each other with the knowledge that we had. Did we think that we were better than someone else because I keep, the holy days this way, or the calendar this way, or, fill in the blank, pick your topic, because, we've all been in this tradition for a very long time, and there have always been things that have caused division. But one of the things that I find is so inspiring is that we can all have this conversation and not feel the need to hate one another because we have a different understanding. And like I said, ultimately what it boils down to is, did we give each other space? Did we show each other love and mercy? When it came to a topic like this that wasn't as clear, or some others might think is clear. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This is Jim Steinley again. Yeah, we keep some of our group keeps the how should I say it? The day of the conjunction, and some of us, including myself and my wife, we keep start the day at that Sabbath that evening, or not at the Sabbath, the sundown that evening, starting that would be the new day of the new month. And but so when we get together, we have 2 different days that are that people are keeping the feast on. And this year we kept our day. Well, they kept their day first, and so we went and traveled down there and met with them. And then we kept our own day afterwards. And it's like, yes, if they believe that they are right, and we believe that we are right. But as you said, that we need to show mercy and love to one another. If you're actively searching and trying to determine what is what, and just because we don't come to the same understanding, we need to be able to, just like you said, show that mercy, show that love, and try and accommodate and try and meet together as we can without offending our own conscience. But yet, going the extra mile, maybe you want to say.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Thanks for your thoughts on it.
And we've had folks meet with us in our small congregation that had different opinions on whether or not to have leavened bread during what some folks call the Passover, what some folks call elements. That's another sticky point. And, there were only a handful of us that stood up for this gentleman. He did his presentation of why he thought, it was leavened bread. And when we got done, I basically told him, I said, look, Gene, you've convinced yourself, and if this is what you feel is the right thing to do, then by all means do it, but don't go against what you feel is right in order to support a false sense of unity. Because we've been in that atmosphere where, you couldn't question, you couldn't discuss. And because so many of these things were swept under the rug and not discussed openly, lovingly, I think ultimately when the heavy-handedness was gone, we're all independent, many of these things bubbled up to the surface, and no one had really learned how to talk to one another in a loving way. And that's why things just got out of hand. And, praise God that, we're all coming back to some understanding, and that it's more important to give each other space and to understand where each other is coming from. Because we're going to have to do it in the kingdom. One way or another, we have to get it worked out now. I'd rather get it worked out now than later, I guess. And when I say worked out now, I mean just relationships and how to treat one another.
Right.
Hey, this is Chris DeWeese. I'll talk on the opposite side of what Lorraine just did. But we went to Sukkot. Our assembly keeps the sellout calendar, the Hillel 2 calendar, just because we're too lazy or whatever. But we got down to Sukkot, and we were looking at the paper, and we're watching, and it's supposed to be Shabbat, and people are moving around and buying and selling stuff, and we're all confused. So we looked at their calendar and realized that they were a day different. which I don't know how anybody was a day different this year because the sighted moon people were 2 days different. So, we just said, okay, we're in their house. We're going to respect them. We'll do what's in their house. Right. And there's like 700 people at this place, but we were, I guess, the only people who thought that way because there were so many different calendars there. And with lunar Sabbatarians there, every day was somebody's Sabbath. And it was to the point of ridiculous where somebody's firing up a chainsaw on every day of the week. So at some point you have to be able to drop your doctrines in order to have, to have some sort of a unity. Otherwise it's just kind of chaos,
I guess I wasn't really referring to the lunar Sabbatarians per se, because that gets a little. I'm having a hard time with that, especially after looking at Don Roth's thing about how, the Sabbath is the Sabbath, and it's meant to follow the solar cycle, not the moon.
Oh, I wasn't bringing that up to debate.
But no. I hear what you're saying about.
But if that was me, if I believed that, if I didn't believe in the seventh-day Sabbath, I would not then invade a Sukkot or Feast of Tabernacles that did keep the seventh-day Sabbath. I would do my own thing, and that's where that's the extreme position is the lunar Sabbatarians. But when you have somebody sighted the moon in North Dakota, the next person sighted the moon in Jerusalem, the next person is looking at the Abib. And so you have 3 Sabbath days in a row, and then you have the weekly Sabbath. Then you're looking at having 4 or 5 Shabbats during an 8-day festival. It kind of tends to paralyze the group. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, not that I'm pushing a particular feast site or anything, but I feel that where we went this year, it was handled rather nicely. If it was your Shabbat or if it was your high day, it was your high day. Great. There was always something going on. It was either a service or a seminar. I don't know, Don. Do you feel like we pointed out a specific days or anything like that, or?
Okay, you're referring to Iowa. Pretty much everyone that goes to Iowa, and this is just my thoughts. This is not an official statement of anybody other than me. When you go to Iowa, it's pretty much understood that it is a Hillel feast site, accommodating other calendars. So, with that knowledge, it's not we're going to accept and consolidate and do everybody. It's basically a Hillel feast site, but it is trying to lovingly and thoughtfully accommodate those on other calendars. The primary, I'm going to say, schedule was pretty much Hillel, but they did make they made arrangements to welcome those on other calendars. So I think what Chris was mentioning was there was no, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like there was no host calendar accommodating anything. It does sound like chaos.
Well, they had a host calendar, and based upon when the restaurant was closed, we could figure out which day was the Sabbath for these guys. So that's what we oriented around. But what I'm getting at is individuals who've studied this extensively and have very passionate stances, are everywhere about any doctrine. And it was it wasn't that the site is very much anti-authoritarian. They're coming out, but just one particular site. It's not, worldwide. It's not a global thing. But what I'm just saying is that when you're in somebody else's house, when you're in somebody else's organization, that to be respectful of them, not talking about anybody in specific, right. But that's what we, as our group went down, our assembly went to one place together, most of us. And when we realized that it was not a Hillel site, then we said, okay, we're switching. We're going to honor the people that were here in order for us to be able to fellowship, because this is the net result, is because there were even a large presence of lunar Sabbatarians. At no point, at no day, was the hall completely full. Every day, somebody thought it was their Sabbath, or it wasn't their Sabbath. So when you had 740 people in one place, but the maximum attendance for the church service was only about 350, you're missing it. That's what I'm getting at, is that it's not a sellout position to honor the beliefs of the people who are hosting, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And it sounds like that's what happens in Iowa. I was there in Iowa a couple of years ago, and that is what happens in Iowa. But I was just saying that for the sake of others who have passionate positions, when you're at the larger gatherings, it's kind of the time to put things aside and get to know your brethren, I think. But I could be wrong. Anyway, shutting up now.
Well, no, we're essentially saying the same thing, Chris. You're just coming at it from a different approach. That's all. There's nothing bad or good or whatever. It's just, there's no law against love, right? So.
Hey, Don, this is Tim Rupp. There's a couple of 3 things. Just for the people who don't know it, I've done some study on this. Islam has a 12-month calendar, and they're lunar, looking at the first crescent. There's no problems with intercalation or anything like that. And they still have 4 or 5 different schools. They have arguments on the calendar inside of Islam with that, okay? Because everything is not specifically defined in the Old Testament. So this is not refined to, just a small group. Islam is the largest group of religious people in the world, 1.3 billion, and they have calendar controversies, and they don't have intercalation. So think about that. Also, with the calendar, I hate to bring this up because Worldwide was so overboard on all this, but there are leaders, there are teachers, and leaders and teachers are supposed to smooth things out. They're not supposed to quench everything the way Worldwide did, but they're supposed to help show the way certain things are. I bring that up because I'm here in Colorado. I moved here about 3 years ago. There's a very large Messianic community here. I mean, prayer shawls and very Talmudic and all these. And almost nobody keeps the Hillel calendar. They're like, yeah, why would I keep the Hillel calendar where everybody knows that's wrong? So they keep the observed calendar. Some of them keep it locally and some of them keep it in Jerusalem. So there's arguments over that. But, they take a look and they go, yeah, obviously that was a compromise, just the way Council of Nicaea was a compromise on Sunday. It's an interesting thing that there's no worldwide people here in this conversation, but that none of them keep the Hillel calendar. Yet they are able to get along being both locally observed new moon with crescent and Jerusalem new moon crescent. I think that's kind of great, and that's a good argument to have. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I just want to mention some of the chat here for the sake of the recording, because the recording doesn't get the chat when they don't see it. Okay. The 2 websites they mentioned are going to be in the meeting notes, which will be emailed to everybody after the meeting. Okay, I did mention the barley can be changed in the speed it grows by the conditions. Sudden change would slow the barley down. Chris DeWeese said Joshua 5 is a kind of calendar marker as well. When the Hebrews crossed into the promised land right after Pesach time. Okay. Peggy's going to read. Answering a question here in chat room. It says, Don, can you send out your PowerPoint? It is up online someplace.
I'm not sure.
Or not? It's out there.
We will put it up on thinkgod.org someplace.
Okay. Peggy's going to go. Part of the reason we're doing this was it did land on the first day of the new year on our calendar. The civil calendar of the United States. B, Peggy has been trying to get me to go through this calendar seminar for the last 15 years. Finally, it happened, and she wants to go through and do edits on it. And so when we get the final copy, it will be available on thinkgod.org someplace. This session is being recorded. So tomorrow, hopefully, we will have a link on the Saturday portion of the website calendar.
And we'll put a link to the calendar seminar in the same place.
And we will put a link to the calendar seminar at the same place. So to answer that question,
we'll put it on.
We'll have it on thinkgod.org tomorrow someplace on the actual first page calendar. David,
Hey, Don,
yes.
I'd like to throw one more wrench in here, and that's sort of why I thought maybe you did this. This year is likely that, and those people who don't believe in ABIB, and by the way, the people who believe in Takupa means equinox or solstice, and I disagree with that. I don't believe that ABIB means barley. I believe a whole general kind of thing. But I believe the whole general kind of thing is going to point to having the calendar start a month earlier than the Hillel calendar. I don't know if you're well aware of that, Don, but I think that's the most likely proposition that's coming up this year. And I just figured I'd throw that out there to let people know that it's likely that there's a large group of people who may be meeting early this year.
Right, we've been discussing that, and again, ironically, the year that we did go early, we were with, actually, you were with us, and we were together in Pigeon Forge. It was actually one of my best feasts ever. I really enjoyed it.
I thought it was a great feast.
The food. You could open your own restaurant, Jim. It'd be great. You are an awesome chef. Anyways, it was one of the best feasts ever I have experienced. Now, Corey and Beth will tell you otherwise because they were the only two kids and they were kind of trapped. But, well, except for Jim's young ones, who are now quite a bit older. Anyhow, David Geyer asks, there's the traditional, then your calendar view. How many people observe your view? How many other views are there? Oh, there are dozens of views. I mean, I gave this presentation in 2000 in Baraboo, and somebody came up to me and just gave me an earful. You didn't do the full moon calendar. How come you didn't? And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I sat and talked to this person talked to me for about 45 minutes. I didn't really get a word in edgewise. Very passionate about her full moon calendar. And I asked a question, how can you tell when the absolute full moon is? There's a 3-day window. And she said when the full moon rises at the same time the sun sets, that's the absolute full moon. It's a very visible sign. So,
that's the beginning of the month.
And that's the beginning of their month, is the full moon. So
it is about an 18-hour to 20-hour window.
Right. As for vision, though, it could be, there's a large window there. And that's her explanation. So, Dave, there are so many different views out there. People have looked at Psalms 81 and have come up with the new full moon. There are so many different views out there, and not going to discount anybody's views on it because I don't think it's a salvation issue.
Actually, Don, you should discount. I'm sorry. Psalms 81 is about celebrating the Passover and the days of unleavened bread. It has nothing to do with the calendar. The people who want to bring that in are trying to bring in some kind of side issue. The people who go to Genesis 1:14 are perfectly justified, because I believe in Genesis 1:14. But the people who bring in Psalms 81, I'm sorry, that has nothing to do with the calendar.
Well, that's what we had determined too, was the same thing.
But there are people.
But there are people who do, and I'm not going to get into that debate.
And I think they're mistaken.
Well, yeah.
Right. Okay. Next question was from the Benzinger in West Virginia.
That guy Bob Field.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
comprehensively on it as well. They've all become calendar experts.
One of these guys just sit there showing.
What does the Bible say? What do they say there?
Now that's what their discussion was going to be.
Yeah. What is a calendar? Explanation of how different calendars work. What does the Bible say?
We have
Are
some
they Sabbath
guests
keepers?
from down under.
The feasts?
I think so, yeah. I don't know much about them.
Oh, so what people do is post comments.
Well, if you hooked into it properly, then you could talk and it's like a chat room.
I mean live audio.
Because
Yeah. So
we
they're going to show a little presentation and then have a discussion.
Donna, on the top of your screen should be a little microphone.
Rickon, you know why you get in trouble with me?
If
You
you
don't
could,
know what's up. You just keep going. It's not your place to backstab me or comment unless I ask you. I've told you what to do, go and do it. So yes, Daddy, go and do it. Why is it all of
Don,
a
mute
sudden
that
you know
mic,
more than
man.
me?
We don't need to hear that.
it's muted.
That's what I was trying to do.
I tried at least let them mute their own mic.
We're reading John Dick Benzinger.
Okay. John Benzinger was addressing Paul and Lorraine. Paul and Lorraine replied, and then I think that's it. Oh, Anna said, I used to be up, but I'm not sure if it's...
The calendar.
Oh, is the calendar 7er is up, if that website is up anymore? We will update it. We will get it on thinkgod.org.
Link it someplace.
Yeah, someplace. Any other comments?
And we'll post it on the group.
Hey, Don, I'd like to add one last thing. I have a 420-page calendar book. Guy Swenson wrote some new stuff that I looked at, and it actually opened my eyes to a few things because I was always completely against the authoritarian kind of look at stuff. He pointed some stuff out to me. He pointed out for authoritarian. I saw it against. I think the people who preach the gospel of the calendar are missing the point. And I do think that's what some people do. I mean, I have a 420-page book on the calendar, but I have a 300-page book on the Passover. I have, a number of things. And I'm simply going to say, I think that the calendar, there's two rules. You start the year in the spring, and you start the month on the new moon. You can argue about what those other things are, and that's why I reject the calculated calendar, because it rejects both of those. But I'm open for all kinds of things, and I think a lot of people don't want to take a look. Just take a look and then go on from there. Thanks.
You see Jeffrey there? You have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to thank you for your comment about Iowa. That is exactly what the Iowa site is. It's a traditional Hillel site. It runs, that is the main time period, and that site has been accommodating of both of the other two, of Jerusalem local observance and local observance of the Crescent for several years. And there will be a site in Iowa again this year. So those that might want to come to a place where there's a little bit of structure
Woohoo!
in relation to that, but not, you know, a free for all. But this is something we talked about at Winter Family Weekend with several different people, the calendar. And Jim and Lorraine have nailed it on the head. It's not an item that should divide us. It's not an item that should keep you from fellowshipping, and it should not be the core discussion point when we're together. But it does provide for those that are on a different calendar a means of discussing and actually showing love for your brother by being accepting of someone that can at least stand up and say why they believe what they believe.
Yep. I remember having a discussion with Steve Bruns out in Washington. In Washington or Oregon, out west somewhere, way out west. And he was saying, oh, yeah, we do the Jerusalem calendar and this and that. And we were having a nice discussion, and I looked up and I saw the first crescent. And I basically said to him, I said, well, what do we do with that sign? You know, I see it, and you're going tomorrow. And so he was kind of understanding. I was understanding. We learned to accept each other's views on it.
So did anybody learn anything from our calendar seminar?
Peg wants to know, did anybody learn anything from the calendar seminar PowerPoint?
Yeah, this is Jim. I actually did. I didn't know that there were actually people in Church of God tradition who did full moon calendars. I knew, there were some people on the fringe that had done that, but considering everything else, I didn't know that there was anyone who was doing that.
All right. Yeah, I ran into that. For our guests from Australia, yes, this is being recorded. It will be available tomorrow on our website. The website is www.thinkgod.org. When you open on the original page or the opening page, you see a calendar. We will have the link to this recording there tomorrow on the calendar. Or, I'm sorry, for you it'd be today. I keep forgetting you're a day ahead of us.
12 to 14 hours from now.
Maggie goes, 12 to 14 hours from now, it will be on our website. So please forgive me for forgetting that it is tomorrow, today, there. Yes, it is being recorded. Okay. Donna from Australia says, we are part of a small group of scattered people who keep alternative calendars and would love to discuss with others of similar views. Great.
Don?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is James Steinley again. Yeah, would it be appropriate for me to give a address where the calendar I use? It's put out it's on a website of a friend of mine, and it's done by another friend of mine. the articles, and there's a half a dozen articles there. And
Okay.
if I could, I would give out that address.
Okay, here's what you do. You go into, on the top of your screen, you see Mike and then some other stuff.
Oh,
And you the word more.
I'm sorry, I'm only on the phone. I couldn't get in with the computer tonight.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well that's good.
Tell him to give us the website and we'll put it in.
Yeah, Anna's really good.
It's an easy address.
Yeah, we will. You can give
Pardon
us
me?
the address, and then we're gonna put it on the meeting notes.
Okay. It's
Anna, if you can do that for me. Go ahead.
I did send you an email.
Oh, okay. To
Don, yeah, and it's congregations, plural, of God.org /calendar.
Okay.
There's a half a dozen articles there about it.
Congregation, tell him to say it again.
Okay, say it again so we can get it in the meeting notes.
Sure. Yeah. Congregations, plural, of God.org /calendar.
Oh,
it's a very detailed look at all of the stuff. An introduction, facts about the Jewish calendar, postponements, what the Bible does say about the calendar, what about the barley, what about the crescent, and then lingering questions. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, and pretty well put out by this friend of ours. So.
Okay, well, like I said, my seminar was not to focus on any one calendar. I wanted to give a general overview of all of them. So I hope I was successful in doing so. And okay,
I appreciate you taking on such a challenging issue.
It's not the first time. We've been doing this a lot over the years. Basically, what we're trying to do is keep peace and understanding. That's our goal, is to understand where a brother is coming from, so that we have an understanding that, well, this guy is not being different to be, mean. This is what he thinks. So that's what we're trying to do, is build bridges instead of tearing them down. Or,
Right.
Don't forget that love bit. Don't forget love.
That's right. Yeah. Matthew 23:23, and don't forget justice, mercy, and faith.
Yeah.
The bigger part of it.
Oh, okay. For Donna in Australia, is there an email for further discussion?
Yes.
It could be discussed on the. We're doing a group now.
Okay. Again, we have started a Google group for congregational fellowship.
We sent out an email.
Yeah, we sent out an email, and if you wish to be in the group, we'll put that in the meeting notes too.
Hey, Don from Australia, this is Jim.
Yes.
I haven't taken a good look at your site, the details. I got to tell you, it's a pretty looking site. You guys have done a good job of putting that up there.
My idea is Anna's and Peggy's hard work. I wanted everything in one spot, and that's what we came up with. We teamwork. What's that, dear?
Is Jim talking about the Australian site or our site?
Oh.
I was talking about the Australian site.
Oh, okay.
I took a quick look at it, and it looks like it's at least HTML4, if not HTML5, and it comes across. It looks really good. I'll take a look at the articles later on. I don't have time to do that now.
For the sake of sharing, can you type in the meeting notes, the shared public notes, that website? Because I missed it totally.
Sure, I'll put it right back up. Let me just go to it again. I was looking at it in
Yeah, the
Mozilla.
notes are located under More on the top. You click on that, and it'll say Notes. And there's shared notes and there's private notes.
Okay, I was going to put it in the message area. I see any meeting, I see Mike, Cam, and more. So let's try more.
A little more.
Meeting notes?
Yes. You put in the shared public notes. The reason I'm saying that is everyone who's tuned in on the computer had to use an email address. So when the meeting's over, everything in the shared notes goes to everybody.
So we need all the.
So all the stuff, these email, these sites, these all this information we like to put in the shared notes. That way, everyone has a hard copy of it.
Okay, so John Ross is in there.
Right, John Ross is in there.
Oh, somebody else already put it in.
Oh, okay. The Australians in there.
Yeah, www.congregationsofgod.org/calendar is already in there.
I think that was.
Okay, is the Australians in there?
Yeah, that's the Australian
No,
site.
that one's that's a Minnesota site actually.
Oh, that's
the congregationsofgod.org/calendar.
Correct.
so.
Oh, then I'm sorry. What's your site?
I don't have a site. This is James Steinley, but no, I don't have a site. But it's a friend of ours who allowed this other fellow, who's a friend of ours, to put it on there. So.
Oh, but this is the site you would like people to see.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's going to answer and ask a lot of questions about the calendar. Six different articles on different subjects about it.
And I will take a look at it, but just so you know, James, I've taken a look at the biblical scriptures, and I really don't believe that the equinox or the solstices are in scripture. And therefore, when you take a look at the sun, moon, and stars, which I absolutely believe have a major thing to do with the Mohadim, to try and put that in exact area of before the equinox or after the equinox or before the solstice or after the solstice, I just don't see that in scripture.
There is three.
Got the Australians? I haven't seen that.
Again, it kind of depends on where you put the weight. So, yeah, and we can all have different understandings and different weights on different subjects. So,
right.
And so that's understandable what you're saying.
But just so you know, don't put the people who say a bib means that they're looking at a bib barley, because there almost never are. They're looking at going from winter to summer, with the new moon being one of those prospects in there versus an exact thing.
Okay. For the people who are tuning in from Australia, we do this twice a month. On the Friday night before the first Sabbath of the month in American Central Time date, we have a speaker who speaks. It's at 8 p.m. Central Time, U.S. date. And we do this twice a month. We always encourage new speakers, fresh blood. And if you give me your email address, I can add you to the notification list. So you'll get notified of the topic of the meeting and the time and the link information. And if you have a website down there in Australia, put it in the meeting notes, which can be found where the three dots are on the top of your screen. It says more. And then others can correspond with you, and you can correspond with others. Mike, you've been pretty quiet. I love putting people on the spot.
Oh, just a second. I have earbuds in, but I have the wrong ones in.
Oh, it goes in on mic.
Here, hopefully that's better.
Yeah, I hear you now. You usually have something to say, I guess.
Yes. One comment is on the first part of the calendar explanation. It's the backwards explanation, as Don Roth pointed out, and that's not how it's calculated, but that's an explanation of maybe why it was calculated that way. But it's actually based upon a mathematical equation commonly known as a Metonic cycle, and it's a purely mathematical, astronomical, equation by which you can predict the positions of the sun, moon, stars, all those things. And so it's actually, the basis is mathematical, and they don't actually go through all of those calculations to determine things. The days were all preset back in about 300 AD up through another 4,000 years, based upon a mathematical calculation for predicting astronomical phenomenon, which was known. It's called Metonic because we received it through the Greeks, but the Greeks got it from the Babylonians, who had all of those mathematical calculations all figured out before 500 BC. And so
that's all wrong.
It's they do not calculate it based upon the way you said it. Yeah, and Don Roth tried to point that out. Yeah.
Well, but so you know, the Jewish authorities say that it is the Metonic cycle, that it is based upon the Hillel calendar from 350 going forward. But someone like Maimonides in the 1200s said, obviously, that's not the way the calendar was actually done before the 350s or even the 100s. That for close to 1,000 years, from 1000 BC until 100 AD, that's was not what was used.
The dates were set. Actually, it's a purely mathematical calculation, which they maybe looked at their points of view differently on things and made some adjustments. I agree.
Again, you can look and say, looking back, there's a mathematical equation that fits, and they had variances in that. But someone like Maimonides or the Talmud or the Mishnah does not say that that's how they calculated the calendar.
With them?
Where did we get the information?
Oh, we got it. It's like we gave.
Well, you can tell them that.
It's sort of like, right now you ask the average Christian, why do you keep Sabbath on Sunday? And they'll go, oh, well, because that's the day of the resurrection. The Catholic Church will go, no, we keep it on the 8th day, which is superior to the 7th day and comes after. And because God didn't finish his work until he created the 8th day. And that's Catholicism. Then they say, we have the ability to change the day of the Sabbath. The Jewish scholars also say, we have the ability to change in the calendar, and that's what we did. And Maimonides says really clearly, yep, that's what we did. We changed the way the calendar is calculated. And yeah, we know the Metonic cycle, but we decided that we would do it the way we wanted to do it to fit our rules. It's really clearly recorded in history. You can say, well, then we should accept the Jewish authority on that. That's perfectly okay. Just like the Catholics say, you know what, we admire the Seventh-day Adventists because, any Protestant who keeps the Sabbath on Sunday has no biblical authority. The only reason why you keep the Sabbath on Sunday is because the Catholic Church changed it. In the same way, the calendar, Maimonides is really clear and says, oh yeah, it's obvious we kept the observed calendar, but we changed it because we had the authority to do it. That's what history records.
Well, this information came from the encyclopedia.
See, the Assyrians, the ancient Assyrians, actually set our present method of keeping seconds, minutes, and hours, and then that was picked up by the Babylonians. So the Babylonians had meticulous daily star charts, and then they worked out the mathematics of that. So I guess what I'm saying is to think that they were not so bright on knowing the precise, the reason they did that was to give accurate astrological forecasts, ironically.
No, and they did very well at giving astronomical forecasts. They were actually really precise. But where is that in Torah?
No, what I'm saying is that they don't go through every year and look at everything. It was all preset, hundreds and hundreds. So that was based upon a mathematical formula that's based upon knowing the star charts, the astronomy and the mathematics. Now they made adjustments, just like from the Julian to the Gregorian. There was a slight adjustment.
No, there was a major adjustment.
Right, yeah, that was in quotes, air quotes.
You don't even talk about the 14 days. You're talking about starting the new year from around the middle of March to January 1. So
right.
Okay.
No, that was actually from the Metonic. The Greeks used the Metonic cycle, and that started. So the Julian always was from January 1. That was Julius Caesar's.
So where's there any suggestion of a Metonic cycle in Scripture?
No, I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just saying that they don't use those. Like in the presentation, it's like, well, you got to look at this, and you got to look at that, and then what about that? Well, that's all a mathematical formulation. It's not that it's all preset according to precise mathematics.
Right, and those mathematics became more precise over time.
Yes.
From about 500 BC, they were not quite as precise, and by 500 AD, they were much more precise.
Yes, so they made adjustments, but they don't go through every year and say, well, it looks like the sun is, it's actually it'd probably be more accurate to show the mathematics of the Metonic cycle, because they don't actually do it the way it's presented.
I've looked at that, and I think that God actually operates exactly 180 degrees out of phase of the Metonic cycle, saying, no, you guys want to get it exactly right down to the millisecond, and I'm going to tell you, you have to follow it the way that I do it, because I'm God, you're my people, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. And the people want to get it down to the millisecond, I think are missing the point of Scripture in that there's some black and some white and a lot of gray in between. And the Metonic cycle says, oh no, there's no black, there's no white, it's 100%, this is the way it is.
Well, I'm not arguing about how to keep it. I'm just saying in the presentation, it's not quite accurate as to how it's set. That's all I was saying. I agree with you in that the main reason is it's set the way it is in the Bible is based around the temple offerings. And
Absolutely.
in other words, you need to have ripe barley in order to do the first of the first fruits offering. So if you're out of phase there, and you don't have the new barley, you can't do it. So it has to connect with that.
And I believe the major insinuation is that it has to be summer, that is the very beginning of summer, to be able to have, Passover and unleavened bread. And
yeah, so
God is the one who tells you when that is.
Yes.
The Metonic cycle was a mathematical absolute and God says, I don't operate in that kind of time frame. I'm going to step out and tell you, you have to look up to me to see when that is.
Yeah. Um,
Can I say something?
I agree with your point. What you're saying, I'm just saying is that the way the calculated calendar, there's actually a whole lot of mathematics in it, and that goes back to the gematria also.
Oh, and the mathematics are great. The mathematics are beautiful. I
Yes,
don't argue with that.
and then you have the Akbash, Jeremiah's code, which
That one I'm not familiar with.
yeah, Mark Kaplan was showing that, where it actually it corresponds with day of the week. In other words, there's another code, the Akbash code, where you can actually predict the days of the week that the numerical days of the month are,
I
and
didn't know that.
yeah, I mean, so there's and see the Jewish people are very good at mathematics, and so if you read the different writings, different mathematicians within the Jewish community were working out the mathematics of this, all the way back to the time of the Babylonian captivity. And so, there is a point that they made of keeping everybody on the same system based upon a mathematical calculation, but that's without a temple. When you have a temple, you absolutely need to have new barley, and you can't start the year before there's new barley. So, but that was my only point. I'm not saying anything in defense of, that we should use a Metonic cycle for the calc, but just in the presentation, I think that, that would be a good thing to add to the presentation, would be about the 19-year time cycle.
Hello?
Is
Can I
this
get in
Paul?
here? Hello?
Yes.
I would like to defend the presentation as I got the information from the Encyclopedia Judaica, which is a Jewish encyclopedia. And that's where I got the information from, and that's what's in the presentation.
Yeah, and that's
more
not
information,
really.
I have no idea.
That's not really how they do it.
Thank you.
Well,
Is that
the
you there?
Encyclopedia Judaica is wrong.
No, what they're doing is giving a backwards explanation of why, and that's not how they don't actually sit down and calculate that year to year. It's all pre-calculated hundreds of years in advance using mathematics.
Okay, whatever. Mike, when you're done here, you can tell us.
They have done the 177-day backward calculation, but they did it hundreds of years in advance.
Using mathematics, yes.
Yes, and those mathematics are very pure and very good. And I personally believe they ignore the hand of God stepping in and saying, sometimes I change things.
Well, it's a large subject, and it can get really complex, but that was just, I think the point Don Roth was making is there's a mathematics behind it. They don't sit down each year and count 177 days back. It's all done by mathematics, hundreds of years in advance.
And it's been hundreds. Is this Paul, by the way? Paul
Mike.
Wizard?
Mike Waters.
Mike Waters. Okay. And Mike, you're absolutely right. I mean, like I said, you can take a look at the charts, and they're done another 300 years in advance. And the charts I had were from 400 years in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no doubt. And I'm an engineer from MIT, and the math is beautiful. I just don't see it matching up with what the Bible says.
Right, exactly. I agree with you on that. It was just a small point that it's it's not calculated year by year based on counting 170 days back, or 100.
Let me just add one last thing, since there's less of us here. I don't see it matching up in the big picture either. The idea that God is exact precision down to the microsecond ignores that he's our dad, and that things are more general than that, and that we want to say this is right and that's wrong and there's nothing in between, and that doesn't really work as well just looking at my boys, some things that are right for one boy is wrong for another boy. And to not realize that God takes a look down and says, things are more general than that. I have some things that are absolutely wrong, some things that are absolutely right, and I'm going to leave a lot of gray area in between, is the way I see things being written down.
Well, and another thing it doesn't take into account are climate cycles. For example, if you're in a warm cycle or a cold cycle or even a mini ice age, you can be precise mathematically, but you're not going to have the barley for the temple. So there's more things to it than just the mathematics of the astronomy. And
Well,
that's the problem is if you look backwards at the mathematics, 3,000-4,000 BC, the holy days are in like August or July,
Yeah.
you know.
That
And if
shows
you
up on Don Roth's calendar.
yes, and that's using the mathematical formula. And then if you extend it out another 1,000 years, well then the feast days are going into November. So the mathematics is not the only thing.
On Don Roth's calendar.
I'll just say that shows up on Don Roth's calendar calculator. Which
Yeah,
might be why it's down at the
No,
moment.
there's a couple of.
Oh,
There's just a few calendars that are just off.
they're just adjusting things. Or
Yeah, there's just a glitch.
anyways, we're talking about mathematics and this and that and all the other things. We were doing that study about, we're talking about the barley, and for years, at least my understanding or my interpretation of what we taught was that the Sanhedrin goes out after the Sabbath to cut the barley for the Omer. And then when we studied it, it doesn't say that. It says, you, the farmer, are to bring your cutting to be added to the Omer. So it isn't the Sanhedrin doing it. It's you're supposed to bring it. I thought that was rather interesting.
It's your decision.
Yes, Exodus 23:16, and the feast of harvest, the first fruits of your labors, which you have sown in the field, not
Right.
somebody else.
Yeah.
So God's putting the responsibility back on you, the individual, not a group of people.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm a libertarian, and I really want to follow that discussion. But there are some things that God put on the priesthood, and that they were able to make decisions, and they're like, okay, the guys who are 8 miles north are fine, but the guys who are 180 miles north and they're not ready yet, sorry, we'll take them another time. There's got to be some leadership in there, some place to decide, close to Jerusalem, Spain, France. Right, guys?
We got some people listening that we got spring. We're looking at flowers blooming and they're in the fall. Yeah, there's got to be some kind of judgment some way with the extreme north and south.
Don and I were talking the other
All
week
goes
about
forth from Jerusalem.
we were talking about how a later date is probably better for allowing people to get their harvest done, because what about the people that are 50 or 60 miles north in Israel, and that everybody would have a first fruits offering with a later date as compared to an earlier date, and so that's where the early, the very early keeping of the new year is it's probably, if you look at it from the point of view, I should say, of that the harvest can't begin until the priests go out and do their ritual. Well, then you're better early. But if people need to bring in their first fruits to offer them, well, then it's better a little later. And so, like Jim was saying, decisions need to be made as to, if you have just one farm in far south of Israel that has fresh barley, or ripe barley. Well, maybe it's better to have another month to where everybody has a first fruits offering to bring.
Yeah,
See what I'm saying?
On the opposite side of that is, well, let's make it later. And if it's too late, if you're not a farmer, you don't realize this. Trying to plow a wet, muddy field to get stuff underneath is not going to be possible. It literally is not possible, and you might as well pass it in once stuff is all muddy and wet because the rainy season has begun.
Yeah, so it does need to be a decision made, in a sense, by the priesthood, and it does need to be declared based upon the temple, and that's why I would agree that it's not a purely mathematical calculation. It's based upon the priests and the temple in the Bible.
And those priests in the temple are supposed to be God's instruments. I understand often they weren't, but they were supposed to be, and they were supposed to be able to cycle that and say, okay, we understand this guy who's 200 miles north, your crops aren't ready, bring them when they're ready. But we've decided as God's people, we're doing it this way. And like I said, I'm a libertarian, especially after going worldwide and united and seeing all the inside stuff at AC. But there does have to be some leadership so that you can get some judgment.
Yes, my basic point is that in the ancient, the temple times, it was strictly based upon performing the temple sacrifices, and that it was not a purely mathematical calculation during the temple times. And the rabbinic tradition also is that it wasn't either, but that they began the purely mathematical, astronomical and mathematical calculations a few hundred years after the temple was destroyed. And so historically speaking, while they had all the calculations, that they didn't really, as Jim was saying, they didn't really start using it until the first threshold was 300 with Hillel 2, and then they made further adjustments, up to 1,000 years later.
Yeah, and that was for the purpose.
I couldn't agree with you more.
On the same calendar.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I'm gonna wrap it up here, guys. So have a good Sabbath, and we'll catch you at the next one. Take care.
Shabbat shalom.
Okay, so Don,
Company.
I just have to warn you, you open the calendar topic, things may come out that we may be a month earlier than other people again.
Yeah, we've been looking at it.
Okay, I've been looking at it and I'm thinking it's probably pretty likely.
It's God's decision.
Peg says it's God's decision.
I heard her say that and I couldn't agree more. But it's one of those things you take a look and you go, I think I know what God's decision is going to be. I may not be correct, but I think I know where it's going. Okay, thank you, Don.
All right, hey, why don't just I'm going to turn off the recording here. When do you think maybe you have a topic to give to us?